Welcome to the Irish Pagan School podcast. Your hosts are authors and co-founders of the Irish Pagan School here in County Waterford, Ireland, Laura O'Brien and Jon O'Sullivan. Fáilte.
Have you ever wondered about the connection between the Irish god Lugh and leprechauns? Well, Dagdi Eve agus Fáilte. Hi, hello, and welcome. Jon O'Sullivan, the Irish Pagan School here. And that is the question that I received, and I thought it'd be worthwhile taking time to answer. I'll do the person justice. Kira sent us an email in, and so I'll read out that email through. So Kira says, I went through the course you published on Lugh. Gurmagat, thank you very much for that. I saw something curious with regards to him, and maybe you could address in a future video or podcast. Thank you for the invitation. There seems to be a parallel, or at least a conflation, with Lugh and leprechauns. This hasn't only shown up on my YouTube search sessions, but also in high-budget media like American Gods, where the character of the leprechaun, Mad Sweeney, is later revealed to be Lugh himself. Is this a parallel that exists in Ireland, or is it one you know about? All I can find on the question are diasporic or American sources. I'd love your take on it. Lugh is my patron deity. I'm always hungry for more sources on him. I'm devoting this year to furthering my relationship with him. So even if you could point me in the right direction for other sources, I'd be very grateful. Gaurav Malgat, Kira Fraser. Well, again, thank you very much, Kira, for the question. I really do appreciate it. And it is something that's not uncommon, but it's also something that is incorrect. So Nyansa, not hard to say, no. Lugh is not a leprechaun. Lugh does not become a leprechaun. Lugh is not patron god of leprechauns. No. Now, what has happened here is the challenge or the difficulty in regards to the narrative and how it was recorded from the earliest sources. So the earliest sources we have are medieval manuscripts written down by early Christian monks who kind of documented the stories in between records of their monastery, filling in prayer information or whatever it is were in these larger tomes. So it's a very full volume whenever you see books like the Book of Kells, the Great Book of Lecan, Yellow Book of Lecan, all of those manuscripts, medieval manuscripts, is where we get this lore from. Now, there is mention of creatures and entities in the other world. One of the first mentions of a leprechaun is actually as a water spirit. And so there was a king known as Fergus, and King Fergus was kind of blessed by the ability to breathe on the water by taking particular herbs and shoving them in his ears and his mouth and his nose. And this was given to him by the Queen of the Leprechauns, who he had an intimate experience with. And despite her diminutive size, he'd commented or remarked on him about, how it was. Okay, I'm not going to get into an X-rated conversation. But yes, leprechauns in the earliest sense or mention of them are water-type spirits from our lore. Now, later on, the folklore mentality of leprechauns in green coats bringing you luck, crock of gold, rainbows, all that kind of stuff is something that happens a lot later down the line, and it isn't just specifically leprechauns, because there is reference to Dini Shi, people of the other world, or the fairy folk, the good neighbours as they're referred to here in Ireland, and they come from the mounds, the hollow hills, these Shi mounds, which is why they are people of the Shi. Now, those mounds in Ireland connect to the other world and the Sail Ella, the life beyond our life. Now, I have loads of other content on there, so I'm not going to get pulled off into that. But a lot of the time when we read the folklore of Ireland, you can do it on duchas.ie if you're looking for a resource. One of the greatest ones there, the Schools Collection or National Folklore Collection. There's mention of men in small coats, men in green coats, brown coats, red hats, that kind of thing. And it is interactions between people of our world and them as people of the other world that invariably leads to fortune or misfortune. I've done classes on fairy magic there. There's loads of content on the other crowd in our school specifically around that. But we're going to pull it back to Lugh. What has been conflated or mentioned is that the denigration or diminishing of pagan gods resulted in Lugh's influence being diminished down to that of a leprechaun. And When we look at the Eildonach, Lugh is known as the Eildonach, he of the many interlinked talents. When we see him declare himself as at the arrival of Tara in the Cathmarc Tura, the second battle of Moytura, he lists off all of his skills. He's capable of so many different things. And this idea of skillful Tuatha Danann, skillful individuals, is then replicated into these talks of these stories about skillful people of the other crowd who would come in and do you favors. Like there's mention the folklore of a cobbler or a blacksmith in both versions of the stories, and they're the one in their community who reminds people to leave offerings for the other crowd or to not throw your wash water out to disrespect the crowd. And so this individual in their community provides a service for the other crowd. And then one day, one of the people, these good neighbors, hears him doing that, and so they come in at night and they finish off the work he's left sitting, and so that then becomes his good fortune. So this whole elves and the shoemaker classic fairy tale is based in the Irish lore from these older stories. Usually, though, the story ends up with the guy either trying to take advantage of this boon or benefit to him, or he blabs about it and tells someone, in which case the luck is lost to it. So does that link with Lugh, the idea of this skillful circumstance? But when we go back to the talk of the Tuatha Danann when they first arrive into Ireland, which is pre-Lugh, pre-Lugh's birth even, the Tuatha Danann arrive into Ireland. They are referred to as a fleet of 1,000 champions who will be victorious in every strain. They are people of every skill and every talent. So that is part of the Tuatha Danann, those who become the gods of Ireland in that concept. So when Lugh himself arrives to Tara, it's not just a case that he has a skill and a particular talent like the other members of the Tuatha Danann are. He is one who has skills in multiple talents. And it's through that he's able to take the seat of the sage in Nuada's hall, Nuada, who is king at this time. So the story is this denigration or diminishing of pagan gods into smaller, weaker figures who just do you favors or bring mischief to your life. It is an early pagan construct, an early Christian construct, which is then trying to undermine pagan belief. Now, whether that's medieval Christian or whether that's later Christian, hard to say for sure. I haven't personally gone in and done the history on it to dig that back, but there is that shifting in the narrative to break people away from their belief structures of their pagan deities, which we know was done by the missionaries, colonization of the Catholic Church upon Ireland. So, to move on to Mr. Gaiman and his recently famously published, or well, publicized in a new format, because I read American Gods a long time ago. When it came out. No, it was after it came out. Someone kept recommending it to me, and then eventually I finally picked it up and read it, and I found the concept very interesting. I really did. But the narrative that we take our gods with us and the gods exist in our belief structures outside of their root culture um, is an interesting one, but it's also a complex one when we talk about belief structures. So it's possible for anyone to believe in any deities that they wish, but the right way, the way to do it honestly, ethically, and appropriately without appropriation is by going back to the root culture, going back to the root natives, and understanding native sources and supporting that teaching, supporting that learning within those environments, not feeling entitled to take from it, even if you are descended from that bloodline or country or etc. over a distance. Gaiman wrote the character of Mad Sweeney, twisting the understanding of leprechauns. Instead of being small, he's very, very tall. Instead of being like, diminished and mischievous, he's dour. Instead of being, happy-go-lucky, he's actually a tortured soul. So there's a lot to that character, which is very interesting, and it speaks to the culture of Native Irish people outside of their own environments. But it is a fictional character, and him referring to him becoming Lugh, I really didn't enjoy that as part of the narrative of that character because he's not Lugh. He really is like the representation of Mad Sweeney is not in any way Lugh. Um, Going to the root sources, going to the understanding of Lugh as a character, reading about Lugh in and of himself. So again, it's another individual outside of a culture taking the narratives of a culture and presenting it in a different way, or taking the narratives of multiple cultures, because he does it for every god almost of multiple different pantheons and multiple different cultures to present a story or a narrative that suits their own way of doing it. Now, again, I enjoyed it as a work of fiction, but I have problems with it as a work of appropriation because it does step over a lot of particular actual living spiritual beliefs that do still exist in those root cultures. This isn't some fictional mythology. This isn't some fantasy that exists outside of it. These deities are still honored and worshipped in those cultures. And so it's important to speak to that point when we approach this from a spiritual narrative. So, yeah, not a fan of how that character is represented to supposedly maybe kind of be Lugh. It's not Lugh. Um, because Lugh is a much different entity when you actually engage with a spiritual belief and connection of Lugh. Now, there's still levels of difficulty with Lugh. He's a very, in my personal experience, and I am going to speak to my personal experience, he is a very abrupt deity in some ways. He's very direct. If I were to use the word hubris, I wouldn't see that as being mm, outside of the bounds when talking about Lugh. But he's hyper intelligent. He's very capable of in multiple different ways. If you're looking to connect with an Irish god about craft or about skill, of course, go to the 3D Nidanan. Like, if you have a specific craft, you want to deal with them. Again, connect with any god and connect wherever you have the strongest relationship built with a deity is the way to go. But if you're not sure, Lugh is a great all-rounder. He is capable of pretty much fucking anything. Also, when we look at the history and the lore of Lugh, Lugh is a deity of mixed genetics. He's of two different tribes. He is part Fomorian and part Tuatha Dé Danann. And so, narratively speaking, he is the one who undoes the damage done by Bress, who was also part Tuatha Dé Danann, part Fomorian. So, looking at Lugh, again, a lot of people hold him up as this shining sunshine. He's not a sun god, by the way. Absolutely fucking not a sun god. I have loads of other Lugh videos. Check them out too. Um, but people think that he is this blonde, like blue-eyed, like beautiful kind of person. He's a mixed race individual, and that is does not change or in any way or alter how his tribe, the Tuatha Dé Danann, treat him or interact with him, because he becomes king. And in fact, he rules as king after the Battle of Moytura for 40 years. You don't get to rule as king for 40 years unless you're a pretty fucking successful king. So Lugh as a patron deity, working with Lugh, dedication to Lugh. If you're looking for more resources, you need to go into our pagan practices sections, go into irishpagan.school/free. You'll find a lot of recommendations there. The one I would probably focus on is the guided meditation journey work, because that is a way of building a meditation practice within yourself, getting to understand yourself better. That way, when you do begin to have experience or interact with deity, you're able to recognize what is you or of you and what is not. From there, it is about getting into the lore. The Celt Project, uccelt.ie, there's loads of transcriptions and translations of the manuscripts, the core manuscripts there. Take the classes that we have here. Great other recommendation, shout out for Morgan Daimler. They do translation work. I believe they have a book on Lugh as well. And you need to probably then, last recommendations, look at the rest of our YouTube content about pagan practice, being an everyday pagan, and making part of your space and time for that interaction, because it is about right relationship, not just transactional offering. That's what we teach at our school. It's not just I put blessings in, I put like prayer in here and I expect blessings out there. You're not building a spiritual relationship. You're trying to engage with a deity like they're a slot machine. Whereas understanding a deity, getting to know their story, understanding their narrative, getting to know yourself enough that you recognize their perspective, their voice, their agenda, then you build what we call this right relationship, or this core quiveness and this rightness between you and them, which helps align a healthier way to approach spiritual practice. So hopefully that is of use to you. Again, Gaurav Maga, thank you very much for asking the kest or question, because it's a lovely one to talk to about. And Lugh, unfortunately, gets a bit of a bad rap at times. I personally, him and I don't vibe personally, but I know many people who are, honor and worship and work with Lugh and find it a very fulfilling practice for themselves. So until next time, look after yourself, take care, agus slán. Goodbye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a positive review in your podcast listener. Then head over to irishpaganschool.com and enroll in one of our free or paid courses. Slán go fóill, and we will see you next time.